Hi everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar, 5 Hacks for Writing Cold Recruiting Emails That Get Responses. My name is Ali Schaff and I'll be your host today. We are so excited that you've joined us for this awesome webinar and we have tons of great content coming up, but first I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. So you have 2 options for connecting to the webinar audio. You can either connect to the broadcast using your computer's speakers or you can connect via phone. The dial-in information is available in the WebEx panel under Quick Start. If you experience any technical difficulties with WebEx today, please contact WebEx support at 1-866-229-3239. Don't worry about writing that down now. I'll be typing this phone number into the chat panel for your reference during the webinar. After the presentation, you'll have the chance to ask Danny, our presenter, your most burning questions about cold candidate outreach. We encourage you to submit your questions throughout the webinar using the WebEx Q&A pane. We'll also be sending both the recording of today's webinar and the slides via email after the event. And we'll also be live tweeting during the webinar, and we want you to join in on the discussion. We encourage you to tweet about all the great content we're about to share using the hashtag 5RMHacks. You'll see it on the bottom of each slide just in case you need a refresher before setting your tweets. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Danny Halloran. Danny is an opportunity consultant here at SmashFly, which means he spends most of his time speaking with talent acquisition leaders at Fortune 500 companies. His varied past experiences include working on Capitol Hill, recruiting for a leading medical technology company, and promoting cultural education through global exchange programs. When he's not helping companies achieve new heights by finding great talent, you might find Danny traveling the world or wakeboarding. So now that I've introduced Danny, I will hand it off to him to take it from here. Danny?
For the intro, Ali, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, and thank you everyone for attending. So let's get things started. Today, I'll be discussing 5 hacks for writing cold recruiting emails that will help boost your response rates, start relevant conversations, and get more qualified candidates into the door. So whether you're in sales like me or in recruiting, we both sometimes have a bad reputation. But we have to ask ourselves the question, why? And it's because we're not alone. There are probably 30 other recruiters contacting that same passive candidate that you are going after, and to be blunt, they're clogging up their inboxes. So this leads me to ask the question, how will you stand out as a recruiter? The following 5 hacks I'm about to share with you are going to make you shine and stand out from the pack of recruiters who are churning out email templates to prospective candidates. Today, we will go over these 5 simple but highly customizable hacks so you can fill up your account pool with more qualified candidates. At first glance, I can see that these 5 points might seem very simple, but there's ample research from marketing leaders like HubSpot or sales pioneers like MJ Hoffman that prove that these small changes will boost your 3, 4, or maybe even 5% response rate into 20 to 35% response rates across your team. So roughly 25% of LinkedIn emails actually get a response. But when you personalize it and make it about the recipient rather than what you have to offer, it can go up to roughly 75%, as seen in SmashFly's very own Tracy Parsons research. To increase your response rates, you have to stand out. You're going to need attention grabbers to be used in your easily replicated, yet highly customizable message. What you need is a trigger. So to make your first email to a potential candidate stand out, you need to make it personal and meaningful to that specific person. Your candidates are going to probably be asking, why are you reaching out to me? And this is where the trigger that I referred to earlier will help answer that question. So put yourself in the candidate's shoes. Like I said, why are you reaching out? You're reaching out because you found that perfect candidate for a role and something about them really triggered your interest. Was it maybe their LinkedIn description that perfectly aligns with an open rec that you have? Or maybe they came up in a Boolean search. Are you connected through a personal or a mutual connection? All of these things about the candidate triggered your interest in them. So now it's time for you to trigger their interest into you and to your company. Think back about what triggered your interest in them and use that trigger to spark their interest. You're going to have to include it in your first message to them and use it as an attention grabber. Maybe mention that you loved their LinkedIn description or that you Googled their name and found out that they used to be a star college athlete. Maybe they were quoted in an article at their previous company. Calling out these personal triggers will only spark your prospective candidate's interest, but it would also make them highly more likely to respond. Remember that your trigger always needs to be positive, and under no circumstances should you reference any negatives such as layoffs at their company or poor company performance. You want to maintain positive ideas. So here's a trigger in action. So with a quick peek, you can see that a referral was the main trigger here. And with the major point that it was found on the prospect's LinkedIn page. So now that you know what I mean by when I say trigger, we're going to explore how you can tie a trigger into our next hack, and that is crafting subject lines that not only get opens, but also get high response rates. So your message is only as strong as your subject line. So before you ever think about converting a candidate into an applicant from an email message, a killer subject line is what will do just that. And the best way to create an awesome subject line is to use the triggers that we just discussed. Tying in triggers to your subject lines will not only result in opened emails, but it will also elicit responses from these candidates that you're going after. So the best way to approach it is to think about the trigger you plan to use in your message and tie that main point into your subject line. So personalized subject lines always perform better. Shorter subject lines always win, pretty much always. So keep your subject line under 30 characters as much as possible. A recent HubSpot article has even shown that no subject lines also receive high open rates. Using the candidate's name and then including a small tidbit about them will also get you a ton of opens because people just love hearing about themselves. You want to make sure that you get creative and avoid generic subject lines. And if you spend maybe 5 minutes Googling subject lines to avoid, you'll find some useful lists with generic subject lines such as quote-unquote opportunity or work from home. You really have to make sure that you're ahead of the curve and familiarize yourself with what not to do just as much as what you should be focusing on. Another way to stand out from crowded inboxes is by using a unique format for your cold recruiting emails. And we're going to dive into that right now. So when we think about a format, you want to get very unique. And we're going to dive into the details that have been trademarked by sales guru MJ Hoffman that I referred to earlier. And the main point of this format is to draw the eyes of your lead down to a call to action so you can actually have a next step in place rather than the candidate just reading your email. So we've all received those horrible sales and recruiting emails that look like a complete mess, but carefully formatting your email following MJ Hoffman's method will make it easier for your candidate to digest the message and also make them more prone to respond. Like I said earlier, in terms of subject lines, the format it stays true, the briefer the better. According to MJ Hoffman's research, many readers skip through the middle of an email and just read the opening and closing lines. Also, with mobile becoming such an integral part of the apply process, making sure your whole message fits on one screen is absolutely vital. You don't want to be wasting the candidate's time. You want to be short, brief, and to the point. So here we are looking at the template for the why you now message. It's short and it's sweet and it fits on the screen of any mobile device. So first what we're going to do is look at the why you. That's the top line of the F. This is where your trigger ties in, where you state something along the lines of, in researching LinkedIn, I saw that you said X, Y, or Z. Then the next line that we're going to focus on, the second, is you're going to tie in a relevant value proposition that also connects to the quote that the candidate said, or maybe the other trigger that you're using. Maybe the experience ties in with a current hiring initiative. And finally, on the bottom, you have your call to action. What are the next steps that you want to take? Maybe it's a brief 5-minute phone call for a pre-screen. Maybe it's actually getting that candidate into the door for an in-person interview if you're that confident. So here is an example of a brief recruiting why you now example. As you can see, the first line pertains not only to the potential candidate, but you also throw in your trigger quotation and let them know how you found them. Then we're going to focus on the second line, and here we're going to loop in how their background ties into your own value prop. So this is where you're going to put in a small tidbit about yourself. The main point of the why you now is focusing on the candidate at first rather than focusing on your own company. Then finally, at the bottom, you're going to end with a short and brief call to action. This brief email template seriously gets results. And through SmashFly's findings, this style of message elicits a 32% open rate and a very comparable response rate as well. So as a recruiter, I'm sure that you come across the how did you get my information questions. And in situations like these, it's really important to be honest, truthful, and real. There are many ways to guess a candidate's email address, but with a bit of practice or some cheap tools, you should be able to get the hang of it quickly. And when they ask how you got their information, you should be upfront about it. So here's a situation. Just put yourself in it for a minute. You found the absolutely perfect candidate, but you have no idea what their email is after you found them on LinkedIn or you recently read an article about them. So we're going to go into figuring out how you can actually guess that candidate's email. So everybody loves free stuff. I love freebies. If I ever go to a conference, they're fun, doodads, whatever. So if you work at a large company, odds are that you may already have gone through the application process with another candidate from the same exact company. So dig into your ATS and see if you can maybe find what that company's email structure is and try to replicate it. If that fails, another quick and easy method is that you can check out the company's media contacts or their PR page on their website. Odds are that you will find the company's email structure there, and you can simply use that formula to guess your candidate's email address. If your team has any available budget to spend, there are also a few very affordable tools out there for guessing email addresses. That said, it will be your candidate's work email and not their personal address. So keep that in mind. You don't want to be harassing somebody at their work email. So if you think about different tools that are out there, you can look at tools like Reportive, which scrapes LinkedIn accounts and pulls up their email addresses. Another one called SellHack can provide you with a certain number of free credits per month for email addresses. Another option that is readily available is called Kite Desk, which does cost a little bit more, but it can also provide you with direct phone numbers for calling candidates in addition to email addresses. So we're going to wrap up with our final hack, which is persistence. and that is simply always, always, always follow up with your prospect. I'm going to let you in on a little secret here, maybe not too big of a secret depending if you have any business development representative experience, but most BDRs will actually go through a 5 to 8 point touch point model over the span of 2 weeks to start to try to generate a conversation or get time on somebody's calendar. When I say touch point model, it might sound like a buzzword or something like that. It's actually a scheduled cadence of alternating calls and emails that become more frequent towards the end of the process. And near the end of the touchpoint process, you should be sending out a soft breakup email and then a hard breakup email. The touches getting closer to the end will create a sense of urgency and should be eliciting a response. So you can get higher response rates as you go through the touchpoint process. So what I would recommend there in terms of setting up a touchpoint process would test out which cadence would potentially work for you. So back to the email tools. So we're going to look at some email tracking tools. And there are tools out there like SmashFly, which can actually alert you when your candidates have opened up your sent emails. So when that happens, you should look at it as an awesome opportunity to call the prospect, as they're warm and odds are that they will at least remember your content. These alerts can lead to really meaningful conversations and potentially lead to an interview, if not a pre-screening phone call. There's also a few other tools out there such as EBSTA, Yesware, Outreach, or Serious Insights that provide the same service, but they're geared much more towards sales or BDR roles. But if you look at SmashFly, it's geared specifically towards recruiters. So let's go over some just brief lessons learned that would help boost your response rate. So the processes that I went over today are widely used in business development representative roles as well as sales roles. But instead of using it to build new business, these tools and methods can easily be applied to build new talent to your organization through recruiters or sourcers using similar methods. This process was actually vital to my previous recruiting department. In times of high-level hiring, we were actually the number one hire in the state with hiring roughly 90 per month. It also works well with leading recruiters that I've worked with. A few of my colleagues that are on my team used to use very similar methods before they came over to SmashFly. So this makes you stand out from the crowd rather than clogging up your inbox. You should also be able to fly through the why you now emails. You should not be spending more than 5 minutes per email, and it'll be easy to find triggers that tie into your company's value proposition if you keep a keen eye open, or maybe an applicable position for the candidate. A higher rate of more qualified candidates will be seen if you apply these methods, and it'll also definitely elicit more open emails and start more conversations. A final thought before we pass it off to my colleague, Allie, is that you can always think about this in more of a nurturing track. If the prospect is not interested now, you can nurture them with some content and maybe send them a new message 6 or 3 months down the line. You can always keep the silver medalists in the back of your head and maybe utilize them in your CRM. So that's all I have for you today. I can't thank you enough for joining us. It seems like we've ended a little bit early, so I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Allie.
All right. Thank you so much, Danny, for that wonderful presentation. It was great hearing you talk about cold outreach and how recruiters can make that work for them. So we do have a couple questions for you. Are you ready to answer them?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right. Well, first of all, one listener sent in the question, what was the name of the sales guru you mentioned earlier? They heard it a couple times, but weren't able to catch the person's name. So can you repeat that for us?
Yeah, of course. His name is MJ Hoffman, and he's based out of the Boston area where SmashFly also is located. and he's really helped go through training and focuses mainly on Why You Now training for sales people, but the same methods can easily be applied to recruiters.
Great. Awesome. And also, do you have any other resources that you'd recommend to people interested in this topic?
Yeah, if I was thinking about and finding resources, I would definitely look into some sales-related resources or SmashFly resources, which are on our homepage. There's tons and tons of awesome email lists that can help with great subject lines that come out of HubSpot or OpenView Ventures. They create some really, really nice content on what subject lines actually work and what subject lines don't work. So I'd say very on top of those points.
Yeah, awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you, Danny. And finally, we have time for one more question here, I think. So the last question is, how can a recruiter who's using the touchpoint model that you mentioned for the first time discover the cadence that works for them?
So at this point, what I would recommend is to try out a few different sort of schedules. So there's some touchpoint models that last 5 touches over the span of like a week and a half. And you start off with the early message, and then as time progresses, your touches become closer together. So maybe you'll send a email and your phone call, the Why You Now email, on your first touch, and then 3 days later, you do a phone call followed up by maybe you missed my initial email. So there's lots of resources out there as how to find different touchpoint models that work for different teams.
All right, great. And actually, Danny, if you don't mind, we have one more question that just came in. Can you give some examples of catchy subject lines?
Yeah. So I would say some subject lines that our team has seen great success with, besides the person's name and then your quotation, a few others that work well would be, I hope all is well. Another one, maybe you know that the prospective candidate has attended a conference. So just say, put in the conference name and then your thoughts, question mark. Question marks work quite well, but you really do want to look into what not to use just as much as what to use. There's so many just markety type of emails that we can all just see through. I mean, think about your own inbox. If you get a sales email or a recruiter email, you know it just about instantly. So you really have to stay on top of what not to use just as much as what you should be using.
That is a great point. Danny, thank you so much for joining us today. Fabulous presentation. It was great to hear all your insights. And to everyone who attended the webinar today, thank you so much. We were thrilled to have you join us. We will be following up shortly with the recording and the slides from the presentation today. So don't worry if you missed anything, or if you want to share this with any of your friends, we'll be emailing that to you at the email address that you signed up with. All right, so I think that that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much, and everyone enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.